understanding of the faith of Christ. I'm sure the reason why a lot of us are all sort of sitting here a little bit like stunned is because of the intuition, the intuitiveness of everything that they said. And we're not all buying it, if you all could recognize, because they sat there with like a kind of an air, but actually because they were saying exactly what our hearts already tell us is true. Yet, why are we so distracted with abstraction? Why are there personalities on the internet that don't actually pull us into that same intuitiveness, and yet are described as being Orthodox? I would say that Orthodoxy is more found at the fringes of society. It's found where people live subsistently, where they share, where they have to live the cross. If there is no cross in your life, even though you might speak about theosis, you don't know theosis. And so that's a challenge to all of us. I'm not necessarily saying this as though I possess that, but it means then for those of us who live in Toronto, greater ascesis is necessary. We have to go to the cross. And that's why that was so beautiful. Because they live it, and maybe they're required to, because the terrain forces them to. Anyhow, it breaks my heart at how beautiful that is. It's just spot on. What'll come now between me and Deacon Michael will be a very difficult thing. Not what he's going to say, what I'm going to say.
Well, no. Everything I prepared is beautiful and quiet. No,
yeah, that's true.
Everything the Father has is heart truths.
No. So let me tell you one anecdotal thing. So, while we were out there, these people are like tanks. The vigil was 3.5 hours, and it was 40 degrees, and everyone stood like this. Think about standing like this for 3 hours. It's all okay until you realize you're wearing hiking boots, and the next person next to you is not moving, and we all smell, and it's 40 degrees. It's great.
I managed to wring out my jeans afterwards.
Yeah, you really could. It was so hot in there. And so we did the liturgy in the morning, vigil, and then they came time to do all-night acatists, and Deacon Michael said, "Hey, you gonna come?" And it was on the floor of our classroom. You go. Anyway, so Deacon Michael has a lot more fortitude when it comes to these things.
Okay, once in a lifetime. That's all it was.
There you go.
How do you? What key do I do? Okay, yeah, sure. So again, I think they kind of talked a lot about our life. Just some brief things that maybe you're not aware of. So why are we here? So Olga, every person that we met there would say, "My Yupik name is this. My baptismal name is this." There's this idea of you have two names, kind of thing. Your Yupik name is not actually the one given by your parents. Your baptismal name is given by your parents. Your Yupik name is given to you later, kind of thing. But it's the idea of names are a little bit fluid there. Michael is her last name. So her first name is Arsenkuk, or Matushka Olga. Matushka just meaning priest wife. Michael, sometime around when the Americans bought Alaska, they forced people to have patrilinear names. So what did they do? Well, they chose, my father was Michael, so that's my last name. So almost the people. My father was Larson. My father was Fisher. Whatever the names were, that became their last names. So that's kind of how they kind of have their family last names. She lived 1916 to 1979. Really interesting. She actually attended a residential school set up by Moravian missionaries, kind of thing. That was one of the only 3 or 4 times that she left her village. Also, when her husband went to seminary. She was a healer, midwife, an elder, a priest, a mother. She had 13 children. There was 4 of her children still there at the glorification of her life. One of them they brought in a stretcher because he was paralyzed in a care home, and they carried him by their hands from a boat from 100 kilometers away and brought him to the church to venerate his mother. Traditional life, poor. She was actually a reindeer herder. Her family kind of followed a herd of reindeer and kind of lived off of them, kind of thing originally. And again, like we heard about her life. A lot of miracles at her death. What's really fascinating about her is that no one really kind of thought of her as a saintly person. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's really because there's this random Ukrainian priest that went to seminary and actually got a job as a teacher up in Alaska. And he started doing oral histories of Native Americans because he was interested in Orthodoxy and trying to figure out where this came from. That met a woman that was from this village, and she was Matushka Olga's great niece. And so through it, started talking with her and kind of recognized that she was kind of holy. She ended up dying about 4 or 5 years into her marriage, and she started kind of publish part of her life in one of his books. And then a ton of people started coming to her afterwards saying that there was miracles, and then kind of do that. And that's that Michael Oleska that we saw on the phone.
Dcn, speak up a bit.
Okay, story. So, a Carpathian Russian priest and deacon walk into a village. It sounds like a bad joke. Actually, there was a joke at All Night Vigil. There was a Carpathian Russian deacon, an OCA priest, and an Antiochian priest, and a Greek priest, and we were all serving at a Kathist in a random village at 2 a.m. in the morning, and it sounded like a joke, and the priest said it that way, and then said, and I'm not sure what the punchline is yet, so just watch. And we started the stories. So anyways, just bring that up. So that's us traveling to it. We flew to Vancouver, then to Anchorage, then flew to Bethel, which is right on the coast, and then took a boat up to Quebec. It wasn't quite roughing it. We were prepared and told of like bring the boots, that we'd be carrying things for miles, that have to feed ourselves, that we might have to sleep in tents. And then when we got there, first of all, we did not need like a bush plane to get there. It was quite a nice plane with a lot of priests, believe it or not. I have another photo with myself with a selfie surrounded by 5 nuns. I felt very safe. We had the entire synod of the bishops, or like about half of the bishops of the OCA on the flight. So somebody there was like, what is the succession plan for this if this happens? We're like, well, there's still 7 bishops, still ordained enough, we'll survive. So anyways, that's fun. We stayed in that school there. That's relatively modern for schools. I have been to a lot of Native American villages in Canada. That is much nicer than we were expecting. Father Paul and I thought that we'd be fighting over chargers, over the one outlet in the school, office or something like that, to do our phones. And luckily, we did not have to do that. So yeah, anything to add so far? I'm just going to let you jump in when you do.
About Matushka Olga as a saint, something that Father Vasily said, and you sort of saw him. He was sitting, he was talking. He was one of the 2 of the main priests that were speaking there. He said that actually there were many women that could have been like Matushka Olga. They sort of all the community had sort of come to some realization that who would they had many common saints among them. And then he said it was as though in heaven that there was a bit of a decision among the women that she would represent the many women who were exactly like her. And so her cause for glorification was actually a reflection of the holiness that existed among the women in Queeflook. And it was that school was certainly the Hilton of schools. But the homes were not the Hilton. So that must have been like a government-funded kind of thing. And yeah, that plane ride, the plane rides were amazing because, there was at least some holy people on that plane. So I was like, this definitely is not going down, because that guy. And maybe you too. Give me an amen over there. Yeah, it's a bit like that. It was fun being on a plane. Everybody, there were Catholics everywhere. It was just like, yeah, it's great.
So just to give you an idea where we went. So this is a map of Alaska. Just for like your brief history lesson, this is where most of the Alaskan Russian company that they're talking about that kind of enslaved people to force them to do the fur trade. This is purple part. This is Kodiak Island right here. This is the Tlingit people. This is where Juneau and Sitka are, kind of thing. There's only about it's actually almost a dead language. It's actually being revitalized. There's only about 500 speakers left of it. The Lutic and the Unangaks were much better with that, particularly the people, the Sugpiaq and Kodiak, were, because of the mission of Alaska, they protected their culture a lot better by the priests. An interesting story about Kodiak is that it had 2 churches, one for the natives, one for the Russians. So there was even segregation, even though it was the same priest that served both. kind of thing. And so, like, it's not a perfect world. Like, it's a weird history within there. Then you have the Yupik here, Inuit up here, and the Dene right here. So we flew into Anchorage, and then this is where Kwethluk is. It's all dominated by rivers. This is a Flutic river. This is where most of the Orthodox churches are in the Dene. There is another river here, I forgot the name, Kuskokwim, which is this one. And then there is the Yukon River up there. And so that's people. These people were evangelized 50 years after the Lutic. And they were evangelized first by a person named Juvenali, who was killed right here as he was trying to go. It turned out to be a mistaken identity kind of thing. And they actually had oral tradition that Father Michael Leska found out 55 years later by village stories taught down by the elders of how it happened, kind of thing. Kind of thing. It wasn't until another person named St Yakov, who's a Creole person, an actual native person from one of these islands right here, actually decided to go missionize and go up to that village. So that's kind of the history of it. We can move to the next one. So just giving an idea, this is a map of all the Orthodox churches in Alaska. So you can basically see the rivers here and where all the Native American people live and kind of where they are. See, this is Sitka over here with the lineage there.
Not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's 96 churches. Was there another slide on the screen? No. Okay. Yeah. So there's 96 churches in Alaska and 56 priests. So there you are. And that's in the OCA. Then there's about 6 other parishes in other jurisdictions, all around Anchorage. Yeah.
Can I just ask, what about Catholicism and Protestant churches?
Yeah.
Or is it all Orthodox?
It's not all Orthodox, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But no, it's not. And actually, in this village, there is a Moravian church, which is interesting. That gets a service twice a year. I'm sorry? Moravian, yeah. Moravian is like an evangelical branch of Lutheranism, is my understanding. So this is Kwethluk. They have 100 people, about 180 children, kind of thing, about 800, 900 people. We showed pictures, just giving an idea of the poverty. Like this is, 400 square feet houses, kind of thing. They're not giant, kind of thing. They have not looked great. A lot of people live on the native corporation dividends, which is basically like something the Alaskan government gives in lieu of the land that they've taken and resources, a resource dividend, some sort of poverty subsistence, and only about a quarter of the people in this village have any other job outside of that. So almost everybody else lives on subsistence living, and that's their thing. So you make maybe $12,000, $15,000 a year. Almost all of that goes to food, kind of thing. So it's a very and gas for your vehicles and kind of things like that. Like you go into 3 to 4 times a year to go buy clothes, and go buy supplies and stuff like that. That's kind of your life. So it's not poor, and there's a lot less alcoholism or smoking than you find in some other places in Canada, for example, among Native American villages. But it's not exactly rich in any sort of sense of the way. Like, people were very, very poor. Sorry.
No, I thought one interesting thing about the documentary versus the way that we experienced Kwethluk, at least I experienced Kwethluk, is that the documentary made some real efforts to not demonstrate the poverty that was there. So it sort of looked a bit clean and nice. The reality was there were a lot of cars like that. You could feel like it was rough. If you were from a bit of a more, if you're a live off the land kind of a person, you would still probably find it rough. Yes, as Father Deacon Michael said, 400 square feet homes, some homes made out of plywood, broken down cars in between homes.
Plywood's covering broken windows, kind of thing. Tarps covering old roofs that had broken down.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
And no house looked like it had the right amount of people in it. There's so many people living in.
There's 100 houses in Kwethluk for 900 people. So that gives you an idea of how dense they are. Now again, that's multi-generational. That's partially a choice, but that's also just a thing. That's the priest's house.
That's the priest's house right there.
That's Father Vasily, the person you saw in the video. That's his house. And just to the left of it is a shed and his smokehouse that he smokes his fish, because everybody fishes. Sorry.
Who were you saying was killed in the beginning? When you were
Juvenelli. He was one of the monks that went with Father Herman, who became Saint Herman, and so he was martyred by the Native Americans, about 10 years into his ministry, by a group of people. And apparently it was mistaken identity. Something about his cross looked like the people of the Inuit that they considered enemies. And so they said that the shaman believed that he was evil and did it, but they always felt that they had done wrong, at least the oral history that they tell. I think, which is different than the journal of the Alaskan American Company that said that kind of slandered it all. But anyways, so it's kind of funny that they found in multiple villages oral records that contradicted the written record that seemed to make a lot more sense for what would have happened. Anyways, next slide. So this Father Vasily, parish priest now, he was the former dean of St. Urban's. Queethlik has kind of become like the cathedral parish for this river district of like 12 villages that go along it. Even though Bethel is like a larger church, a larger community, it's kind of become like the spiritual heart of the place. And so he's kind of moved there to kind of take off that mission. I like this quote. They could see the Bible in our lives, and they just corrected a few minor things, and then they taught us to pray. And so Father Vasily told me this when I asked him, how successful are Protestant missionaries when they come? And he says, they're not successful at all. They're actually not great at all. We actually now have a mission related with an Antiochian church in Anchorage, where we actually try to prepare them for this, because they always say, what you're doing is wrong. Or like, but you're telling me that my entire culture is wrong. Because to them, Orthodoxy and the culture are so uniquely part of it. So it's really interesting. This is what a traditional village house would look like in the Yupik. It's just like a mound of earth dug in that you kind of go in an underground tunnel, kind of thing. So they obviously, there is a colonization. Like that does not look like what the village is today. Part of that is just, if I could live in a wooden house, it might be more efficient. And now that we have ships that can bring us wood, instead of having to live on driftwood that drifts down the river, because there's no trees that are above 6 feet in this village, they're in tundra, kind of thing, we can build houses. Like, some of this is natural, but it has happened, right? The Russian mission was good and bad, kind of thing. Like I mentioned, they mentioned the Russian company and how it enslaved the children. The church was complicit in it, in a way, in that it ran orphanages for those children that were enslaved. Now, it saw it as educating them so that they could become the upper class. And most of the Creole people actually became the upper class part of the Alaskan society, kind of thing. So, they saw the church as protecting their interest, kind of thing. And I'll a little bit more about that. This is all of when the Russian church purchased Alaska. For 20 years, it remained kind of the same. 20 years in, they established a governor. One of the first acts of the governor was to establish a decree that all Native American children, they would divide the Native American villages by different religions. So blue are the red are the Catholics, the blue are the Baptists, the green are the Moravians, the yellow are, I can't remember which one. So they basically kind of divided it up, forced all the children to go to residential schools, sent people out to kind of force them to learn English. I'm sorry?
Were those communities existing already, or is it that they were like, you guys are Catholics now?
Mm-hmm. Kind of, yeah. Like that. Yeah, that's kind of how they came in. It was like, and very much you can read the writings of Stuart, and he's like, we must civilize them. We must bring them to European attitudes. We must bring them to a European mind, kind of thing. So there's a lot different of attitude to the mission.
So like for the most part, were they Orthodox or were they native?
So no, there are definitely unconverted Native Americans at this time. And so like this Inuit people up here, there is something called St. Lawrence Island, which is Orthodox, but there was very little mission up here. And almost none of them were Christianized in any sort of sense. So there is definitely like village tribes that were not Orthodox kind of thing. There's also like already Catholic missionaries in some of this area here that came up from Canada, from the British kind of side of things. So it's not all Orthodox, but a lot of the villages among the Russian areas were 100% Orthodox at this point, kind of thing, or 90%, whatever it could be. Someone had a question?
From the history's past, when missionaries went to foreign lands and introduced this European mindset to religion. Other cultures, they don't understand it the same way, and they develop their own way of thinking. Thinking is a Protestant model. How does the church maintain one idea in this outreach? Because if you isolate these religions, they slowly separate.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I was going to say about the church protecting, and I was going to come back to it, so that's a perfect segue. So during this time, the clergy, who are actually some of the most educated people, the people that can actually speak English, are the ones that defend the people. And it's actually a person in Kodiak that goes to the governor's house every day and is fighting for people and gets one of the main schools kind of closed down a bit. There is this weird thing, the mindset that happens. People do go, and the residential schools last from 1895 to 1950, 1960. The last school is in Kodiak, in Sitka, which is all Tlingit and Russians kind of thing, and it's the last residential school for Kurds kind of thing. So there is this weird mindset that does develop, and there is differences. I was talking to Father Vasily. He said about 30% of Queethlik was Moravian, but it was probably 40 or 50% back in the 50s. And actually, over time, people have started becoming Orthodox again. And their church has, churches that on every Sunday they have 3 priests. 2 of the priests are always traveling to other villages, but whereas the Moravian Church, they now only have services twice a year, kind of thing. So there's been kind of this reversal where they're kind of trying to revitalize the culture. I also asked him about this idea of reclaiming native spirituality. He says that doesn't really happen in the Yupik. There's a bit in the Dene kind of idea, but this idea of that just doesn't kind of come up here. When they think of reclaiming their spirituality, it's becoming Orthodox again now, which is really interesting. You can move to the next one. Sorry, history lesson. So pilgrimage. So this has become a place of pilgrimage. On the bottom left is the relics of St. Olga, the coffin. And so they set up a platform where people can venerate on the right side of the church. So you saw the church in video, kind of thing. The other church, the old church, this is where St Olga would have served her entire life. They didn't build the new church until a few years after her death. They actually have the coffin that she was dug up within. And this is where we got the soil that we brought from right within her coffin, that they took the relics out of. Then you see here on the left is a new grave that's built over top of her old grave after they dug it up, that new wooden thing. To the right there is her husband, Nikolai Michael, archpriest. So you have both of them there. So that's her grave would have looked very much like Father Nikolai's before they dug it up. They kind of fallen apart. Sorry.
So we have some of the soil from inside her coffin. They left her coffin right there, and I'm actually in that photo. I'm headed to go reach the soil right for now. The plain where those graves are right now, the river would flood in, and so when they came to pick up her coffin, even though it was sort of like a thawing time in winter time, when they had picked it up, it was just emptying out with water, like it was rushing out, and so a lot of soil had mixed in with the water. And so one of the priests had said to me that that he thought very strongly that the soil inside her coffin could very well be considered a first-class relic, and so we have that now, and I hope that we'll have that at both of our churches, and anyways, it's as close to a first-class relic of hers as we can receive. Her body would have.
Her bones were intact. Her shawl was intact, and her her medals and her cross, but all of her flesh had decomposed, and so that's why I'm saying it's first class relic. And so they're planning to build, by the way, a new cathedral, and so a lot of the money that was raised during this pilgrimage was for a new church that would fit 400 or 500 people into their village church. Fits about 200 people. Maybe 300 if it was really squished, kind of thing. Like there were 700 people at liturgy, and there was a ton of people just outside because there was no way that they could fit into that church, kind of thing. So they're planning to build that along with a traditional earthen mound that they're going to make a native cultural center, kind of thing, and kind of reclaim a bit of their lifestyle. So that's kind of the plans. The village will have a third church in it. They'll use the other church for Vespers, and then that's one of the big ones. So Father already talked about this, how you could see holiness, and I think Father had a really good phrase that I'm going to steal from him, which is that talking to a lot of these people, you felt like you were actually talking to Matushka Olga yourself. I think that's kind of how you said it. Example of this is this woman Martha that's in the center there. She was the goddaughter of Matushka Olga, and she was talking to me about what she does. She was an addictions counselor. She's now retired, kind of thing. And I asked her, well, what's that like? She's like, well, I just do the tradition of what all the mothers of this village do to it, say to it, and it's that everything that happens to you is God creating who you're meant to be. And that's the message that we give to every single person, because that's the message that I got from Matushka Olga, that's the message I got from my aunt, and that's kind of who it is. And and said, I have a different message for you, which is that you are going to glory in all the pain that you've gone through. but same kind of idea. She was saying that there's a story of Matushka Olga that Father Michael Oleska heard from a random woman that was a therapist in the lower 48 who said that there is this woman with abuse, and she was thinking of giving up a baby, and then she had this vision of this Alaskan Native woman who kind of helped her through it. Anyways, it's a beautiful story. You can read up on it online. And this therapist actually became Orthodox after figuring it out, and she was reaching out to Father Michael because of his book and trying to figure out who this woman was. And by all the counts, by the fact that she could, the native spirituality and things like that, he was able to pinpoint that it was this Matushka Olga. She even called her name Olga, kind of thing. So basically, they kind of did that. But the phrase that she always used is, "Out of God can create great beauty out of desolation," and kind of thing. And so Martha said that's always a phrase that can happen. It's like there is beauty in pain, kind of thing. And that's the way she said it. She said she didn't. That's what she said. Matushka said, which is very similar to what we have in our icon. Other people here, some priests in the village, Father Nikolai Larson, who actually hand carved that. Father Nikolai gave Father Paul a Native American Yupik name, so he can tell you that if we can. I couldn't get the video to run on here, but that's great. And then that person down there is Father John Alexka. What's really interesting about his dad is that apparently 2 weeks before his dad died, he got phone called up by the bishop saying, "I'm going to send you an email that I need you to read at the cathedral tomorrow," and it was the proclamation that she was made a saint. So this guy that spent his entire life doing it got to read this proclamation. 2 weeks later, he died. So he kind of got to spend his life. But that over there is one of Matushka Olga's daughters. That was at the thing. I just want to bring up another thing, is that to Father's comment about that Father Vasily said about how all the people got together. I asked people, are there other saints that you should go? And they said, yeah, in our village we have 2 other people that we can have icons already that we think of as saints. So they have a man named Father Philip, who there's been a ton of miracles of people that have been sick, that have been healed by him. They think of him as a really holy person. And then there's another woman named Anakia that has a bunch of miracles where she had this great devotion to the Mother of God. She was found dead with the icon of the Mother of God in her chest, and a bunch of dogs came to the villagers and kind of brought her to where she was out in the wilderness, where she was clutching it, kind of thing. She stopped a fishing camp from eroding by putting the Mother of God there. She healed a woman by putting the icon of the Mother of God, and she always carried this icon of the Mother of God around. And again, a lot of villagers have icons of her and their things. So they already have in this village 2 people that they are believed in making saints, and they're kind of like, why the hell did this one random woman get made it when there's such many other? Somebody got a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought maybe you could clarify and elaborate. So the priest up at the top center, is he her hagiographer? Is that you said he spent his life publicizing her life? Well,
he spent his life researching the history of the Orthodox Church in Alaska. He's the main person that did it.
Which culminated with the announcement of the glorification.
Exactly. His last 2 weeks of his life were announcing her glorification. And he was one that kind of led that movement to get her canonized. Yep.
I never asked a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
For that other female saint, did you say that the dogs brought her out of the woods?
Dogs came to the village
and
started barking, and then the people followed the dogs to find her body. Yeah. Kind of like, Lassie stuck in the well. That kind of, literally that story is what they were telling. And by the way, like St Olga had this idea of like the birds and the water warming up kind of thing. So there's this tradition of like things happen when someone holy dies, kind of thing. So this is Queethlick, the start of the pilgrimage. We greeted the bishops in a boat. Suddenly a bunch of birds came. The villagers say that this is miraculous. Father Paul and I both believe that it's because there was a drone up in the sky and they're attacking the drone. And then thousands of birds, hundreds of birds started swirling in the sky above us. And then suddenly guns started going off, and we're like, oh, what's going on? And then one of the priests beside me is like, oh yeah, the boys just hunting for their supper. And I didn't realize it was a joke. I thought he was serious. They were actually saluting the bishops as they came up on the boat. Kind of thing, because apparently that's something that you do when you greet a bishop, is you shoot guns at random people. Anyways, sorry. The joys. So we processed into the church, got them dressed, processed back to the old church, where we did the final Panikita. So we actually did the funeral service for her, and kind of sang like Memory Eternal one last time, which was really emotional, kind of thing to do that. And then took up her body from the grave that they placed back on the grave and processed it back to the church. There they read out that she was being a saint. We proceeded into the church, sang her Troparion, and then saying, we magnify you, which is something you only do on the great feast of saint when you have their body in front of them, kind of thing. So it's the first kind of act of sainthood. So that was literally all the canonization was that act of reading it out that she's a saint, and then singing her Troparion and going on to the magnification. So that was first thing. And then, as Father alluded to, so it's really funny because we're just saying, may her soul dwell with the blessed, and then we go up and they say the first thing of the glorification is, Saint, the Synod has proclaimed, as feels good to us in the Holy Spirit, that Saint Arsene, who dwells with the blessed, like may her soul, and then immediately it's she who dwells with the blessed. That's her, kind of thing. We're never going to say Memory Eternal anymore because God knows. There you are. So we did Queethlick in a vigil. It was the hottest day that they have gotten in 100 years. And again, they consider this miraculous. We consider it torturous. It was only 23 degrees, but it was 105 degrees Fahrenheit in the church is what somebody that brought their thermometer into it. 4 native women to the right of me there all fainted from the heat. It was not the most prayerful service. It was all in Yupik. All the services were 60% in Yupik, 30% in Slavonic, or 20% in Slavonic, and 20% in English. So you didn't understand what was going on. I was singing a language that I didn't understand, that I got allowed to sing with the native choir that's there, the local choir. That man there is Father Martin Nikolai, and he has composed most of the Yupik language, and he's the one that wrote Help Write the Cathis and Help Write Her Troparion. So it's really interesting. So, and he's the former priest. He just retired, and that's why Father Vasily is now a priest. That is her body with the coffin open. You can see her skull just very faintly and coming out from underneath there. So that was the only part of the bones you could really see, kind of thing. Everything else is kind of covered out of reverence. Even there's a face covered. There's an idea of like things that are holy are covered in Orthodoxy, and you kind of counter it through mystery. So, her bones are not allowed to leave the village. The elders decided that they would only allow 2 bones to be left for the village. So they have one for the OCA for its national church. They could maybe cut it and give it to other people. And they have 1 bone, both of her feet, that was given to the Diocese of Alaska that it can take with it, that will keep it its cathedral and seminary. Kind of thing. So that is the entirety of her relics that will be allowed to leave the village. Her body must stay there because the village is outside. There was no priest from Canada, actually, that went. Weirdly enough. Just us 2.
Wow.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, we were the only priests from Canada. There was about 10 people from Canada. There was people from Australia, from Romania, from Russia, from London, but weirdly enough, we were the only people from Canada. There was a woman from Niagara, kind of thing. Like there was people from around here, but not any priests. Yeah, sorry?
How did you guys, were you guys invited, or was it, how did you guys end up going?
I'm crazy.
So it wasn't like an invite only
It wasn't an invite-only thing. I kind of knew about it before it was announced, but I just really thought I want to do this. So asked the bishop, and Father Paul was crazy like me and said, "Can we do it?" And asked the bishop, and the bishop said yes. So we went.
You know, when
And
you
it helps that we have St Olga as our church. It helps that our bishop was a missionary in this village for 2 years. So that helped.
And you know, when you invite yourself over to somebody's home because they have a really good meatloaf, but they didn't invite you over, that was it.
There was we had to register.
Showing up.
There was a priest that showed up from Arkansas and just said, if God wants it to happen, it will happen. And, gave somebody a bribe to drive him up and just decided there. And they're like, and they knew him. They're like, oh, this priest. And a funny story. No, I mean, we're being recorded, maybe not. But it was the kind of priest that the other priests were afraid that he might steal a relic and lock the coffin. Anyways, he was just, he was an awesome guy. He was a really amazing fellow. But he was just one of those people of like, I'm just going to go out and do what I need to. If God wants it, it will happen. So anyways.
There was, I don't know what the next slides look like. But,
the next one is the liturgy. But
the fraternity among the people there, especially among the clergy, was really beautiful. I'd never seen so much joy and so much love. I think sometimes we almost over-exaggerate the kind of. There are some of us who do this, who think like, if I'm Orthodox, then I have to be perennially stapling no smile to my face. I have to walk around. The priests were probably solemnly walking through the altar, looking like they were sad. No, it was the exact opposite. There was so much joy. Joy was like really permeating every single thing that was there. There was way too many jokes. I think the clergy were joking more than the people. But it was very much a spirit of joy that was sort of like coloring everything. Everything was fun. Everything was joyful.
It's like Russian seriousness, but as they're like telling you to go somewhere, then they smile and they like pat you on the back and kind of give you like that kind of look, or like make some sort of comment like you English non-Russian fella that doesn't know what he's doing, kind of thing.
Actually, one of the priests from the priest who took over the cathedral church in Sitka, when I got back to Toronto, sent me he made a GIF, or rather a meme. There was somebody took a really nice photo of all these guys in cassocks standing over a hill, and then he took that photo and wrote above it, Versace en noir. And he sent it to me. And this guy is very long beard, huge ponytail. And Father Herman is his name, and he's learning even I think Klingit or in the Yupik language. And he had been actually working for the NSF a long time ago in a previous life. NSA. Sorry, not the NSF. Yeah, the NSA. That's very different. And just the kind of levity that existed was just really beautiful. It was great.
Incredibly serious priest, grown his church from 40 to about 150 in 3 years that he's been in Alaska. It's not like he's like unholy in any sort of way, but also just there was joy.
There was,
So we stayed up after that night and did Akathist. I got to be one of the last clergy that served till 2 a.m. We did the Akathist that day. So I served, went home under the midnight sun, had a shower, wrung out my jeans that were incredibly hot, and got 5 hours of sleep, and then woke up to go to the liturgy the next morning, kind of thing. And so we had 4 children of St. Olga present. There was 50 clergy, 40 of them were Native American, or 30 of them were Native American. And 8 bishops, kind of thing, 200 pilgrims, and 700 or so of the villagers. About 30 to 40% of the villagers apparently show up to church on Sunday. Kind of give you an idea of the level of piety kind of thing within there. And so it was really a really beautiful service. Can you go to the next one? Can you load that link if possible? I don't know if you can. Maybe Father could introduce that. I think some of you may have saw that.
Yeah, there was. in their attempt to prepare communion, they were taking a bit of time, and so
For
they were
37 minutes.
They were as they were singing. As they were singing the hymns, they were sort of like building up, and then they were sort of like working with what can we sing, and then they began singing the Paschal canon in Yupik. And the only way you would understand is because you would hear the word Pascha every like few seconds, and you're like, okay, and the tune was starting to sound like the Paschal canon. And then, just before the chalice came out, almost perfectly timed, they switched into the Paschal Tropar. You know, they were singing "Christ is risen," first in Yupik, then in Slavonic, and then in English, and you know, it was so appropriate, even though it was, as it were, you know, inappropriate because it's not the right season. But around the saints will show us that, you know, essentially the theme of our life, the cry of the heart of every human being is Christ is risen. And so Saint Seraphim Azarov once said that something along the lines of, like, he ends a thought by, and in that day they will be singing Christ is risen out of season. And so we were singing Christ is risen out of season at the glorification of this woman who had changed the earth from that part of the world. Truly, and I said this when I had messaged a few of you, I was even thinking that maybe I would write something later and I would want to entitle it "The Day That Death Was Chased Out of Town." Because it sort of feels like a small town. There's this one road and...
Two roads.
Well, two roads, yeah. But like, yeah, very long. And there wasn't... Death could stand no chance over there. It would be scarcely received.
Play this one or the...
Yeah, play this one.
I have the one you posted as well.
I saw that was happening. I put down my phone quickly. That's why it's late. Think about how weird that was, that it wasn't like, it's not Pascha, but we were all sort of in Pascha mode. Like it switched so well.
Which one did you want?
The naming one?
Yes, I have that one as well.
It was
Can you
pretty
play
cool.
that now?
We were breaking all the rules, and yet the rule, it actually made sense.
We can do that.
Little man. I'm not sure meeting little man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's me.
He got a name. I didn't get a name.
Is that the priest that gave his evidence?
That's right. Yeah. So
Yes.
then when we got to talking, then he's like, I gotta give you a name. And then he gave me little man because he said for two reasons. He said, one, that was the name of his dad, and two, he said that it's not possible that if I think like, you know, the bishops is like Abu Bakr or something.
Abanuka.
Yeah, and which means like big, great warrior. So he's like, you can't be something that's equal to that, so you'll be little man. And then I told him that that's appropriate because Paul means that. And then he was like, yeah, that's what they call my dad. I don't know if he was like, he was with me there. He was like, yeah. Anyways, it's good. You know what? You aspire to things. You might as well call me little man and then I'll work at it.
Dorothy?
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is a small village. This must have been a real happening for them.
Yes, they prepared for 2 years kind of thing. Yes. Yeah, like this was huge for them kind of thing. Like, this is...
The hospitality was like flowing over. They were really pulling out all the stops. I think they were feeding us better than they themselves ate. Like, you know, I went into a convenience store. They only have two stores in that village, and they're both convenience stores. They look exactly like ours. Like, you know, these little corner shops that are not very nice looking. I don't mean like one of the, like, you know, not like a 7-Eleven, a bit low, like one of the lower ones than those. The only difference is that right behind the cash register, you can buy guns. Like serious guns, not like, you know, like I mean,
it's $22 US to buy a block of cheese in one of these stores.
Right, and so I saw a mother come in. I went into, you know, I thought I would patron the store. I bought some shirts that said Quethlook on it, and I bought 2 Powerades because we were sweating to the oldies, and if I didn't get electrolytes, but I thought, like, it was a really expensive Powerade. It was $5 American, and because I wanted one and I was with this guy who was walking with me, I'm like, okay, I'll buy you one too. So $10 for 2 Powerades, and a woman comes and she's buying like a ton of cup of noodles. What we were eating versus her cup of noodles was several different kinds of fish, walrus. Like we were eating, they were treating us. It is exactly as they say. They gave more to us than they took for themselves. They were leaning into the cross even in the way that they loved us, and they didn't stand around saying, "I hope you know there was the cross there." We're gonna eat cup of noodles as you guys enjoy our food. They didn't do that at all. They completely acted like everything was normal. All the preparations they did for us, in order to bring all of those bodies to Kwethluk, they didn't have one single boat. Like I thought, we'd be on some small, like ferry. It wasn't like that. They had to bring everybody on their fishing boats. Every single person, get her going. And so there we were, like 4 people on one boat, 5 on another. And
40 of us came on 8 boats, basically.
Yeah, and then this happened several times throughout the day because of all the different flights that came in through Bethel. Nobody spoke in any bad way. In fact, actually, how many people were on their ATVs, and then they would see a priest pass by, and they would stop, get up, and then they would come up and ask for a blessing. Everybody waved hi. I was saying to somebody, I think I said to the Diakonessa Susie when I got back, if the roles were reversed, and one of us, I said, I do not wish that any of us become famous saints here and then invite Yupik people here, because we would have a very high bar to make for their hospitality. The way that they went out of their way. Yeah, like we would not know how to do that just yet, to show the hospitality that they do. Which, like as they were speaking in the video and as we had experienced it, it was like really showing why we do certain things that we do in this church. Like the things we do through Noble Joseph, the things we do through Agape meals. Like these things are not just, sometimes we find them as, extra or nuisances, but they're so necessary. They're the way we enact our Christianity. And I don't know that you can make Matushka Olgas without having those things. So it was a bit of a reminder, shut up and keep going. You don't know what the stress is just yet until you're eating cup of noodles as somebody else is eating your fish that you just spent more money paying for them to eat.
So just a few things on this, the final thing on the liturgy. Again, I talked about the different language. It's so interesting not knowing the dialect kind of thing. They sang what they call Koskokwin chant, which is like the name of the river. But it's actually like a Siberian chant that like over 200 years has slightly evolved. They preserved some elements. It's changed in those places and it's kind of preserved here, kind of thing. And if you go to the Lutic Islands, it's actually Western Ukrainian chant. So they actually sing Galician chant that was from 200 years ago with its own slight Native American twist. So it's really interesting. Like this here is Holy God. It's Tankira Arsamkuk. Tankira means holy. By the way, that word actually, if you remember, they were talking about cosmos and the I forgot the name of the creation, kind of thing. Tranquilla is the spiritual world that holds the created world, but it like enters in through the Yoah kind of thing. So it's like the idea of being other, of being like beyond, kind of thing, being spiritual, like, which is different than our like idea of holiness, which is like perfect kind of thing. It's like the beyond kind of thing. But it's Tankira Hagayun, Tankira Svandu, Tankira Tukunu Haki Nakli Kukutwanguta. And so it's just giving you an example of kind of one of the things. Interestingly, apparently, Bishop Michael was one of the bishops in the OCA. He came up when he was a teenager to learn how our diocese Proskypenia chant would have sounded with 4-part harmony, because they preserved some of our Proskypenia chant as 4-part harmony up there in these villages, kind of thing. So it's like an interesting kind of time.
The reason why Bishop Michael would have done that in the OCA, who's the Bishop of Newark, New Jersey, is that he is from the Carpatho Rus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can go to that slide. And it was really weird to sing the Tropari in Yupik for Holy Samkuk. And then when we went to Anchorage, it was all in English, or 80% in English with 20% other languages. So village hospitality, this bottom left is a school. That's the foyer. It's very beautiful. What's really fascinating about this, and I don't think you can quite see it, is in this image, there's an icon of St. Olga, kind of thing. As just a random picture of the village elders, and they have St. Olga, and there's actually Father Philip in one of the other pictures, kind of thing. So they actually, in their mural, they have it. They didn't really have crosses in the school because it's supposed to be secular, but they had pictures of priests and Matushka Olga throughout the building, which I found kind of interesting. To Father's thing of the village hospitality, we ate like kings. I'm just going to list it off. I had walrus, seal, bearded seal, whale, which is called muktuk, beaver, quail, salmon hearts, fermented salmon, halibut, whitefish, blackfish, herring, akutak, which is literally Cool Whip, but you make it with blubber, mixed with fruit, kind of thing. Sweet, it's very delicious. And I had a few versions of it. The best one that I think Father Paul and I both liked was fiddlehead akutak with cheese in it. It was absolutely amazing, kind of thing. The other one that I found the most interesting was mouse akutak, which is literally they dig out mouse holes and they take the roots and the grasses that the mice are storing there and they put it into the salad and served it to us. Had something called, I forgot the name of it, but it's like roe on kelp that they dry, kind of thing. Dried fish, kind of thing. Pasta salads, fresh bread. I had veggies twice. There was frozen veggies one day, and there was salad with one of the meals, kind of thing. So that's just giving you an idea of like their substance. But and some of it was harder. Father Paul it had a little bit less than me. He actually skipped up this last banquet. I was jealous of him because my stomach paid for it more than him. Beaver is not a recommended thing for me. I would just say, sorry, I don't know if you want to say anything about the food, but
yeah, just
walrus.
That's walrus up in the corner there. I took a picture of it because I thought I'd never seen walrus before, and I likely will never order it myself again. Some of the food smelled very pungent. They use seal oil as a bit of a preservative, but I think they also like to just cook with it.
Just put it on rice. They had it there to scoop onto your food.
But it has a really gamey smell, and it's not really something like if you're. It's a bit of like as soon as so we came that banquet happened after the Divine Liturgy, which took a long time. When I got into the room, I could smell the seal oil to high heaven, and I then kept walking through. Yeah, it's okay. I'm tired as it was, and it's a bit much, but it's so nice. Another thing that they also made for us on the first day was caribou fried rice.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Which was pretty good.
Yeah,
we were fasting.
Caribou. Yeah. So just so you're aware, the bishop gave a dispensation, and it's a dispensation for this fast, that salmon isn't in season yet. So there's not a lot of fish in the village. There's only dried fish, so that they could make their best food. He gives the dispensation that they're allowed to eat meat during this fast.
Also, clearly, like beans and veggies weren't in abundance. Like there was really nothing to feed us. Like we would have eaten probably just rice all the time
and dried fish.
Dried fish. Like so, and probably the fish was expensive. And so that's why we would have seen things like caribou fried rice and things like that. So it was actually more economy.
But to Father's point,
that it was difficult to feed us.
To Father's point, this is them preparing with an ulu. It's a special half circle knife kind of thing. Some salmon kind of thing. They're preparing on the floor. This woman here says that her grandmother was blind for the last 20 years of her life, but she could still do about 30 fish in an hour using her ulu kind of thing, just by feel of it. Kind of thing. It's just like a skill you get. Preparing the fish and cutting it into the strips the way that it will dry over the smoker kind of thing. This fish was 3 or 4 bins that someone's knew a cousin in a village just past the river, just on the coast, that worked on a trawler that had fish So they brought 2 or 3 like giant Tupperware bins of like 40 fish and brought it up, then like, drove it the 300 kilometers up the river, kind of thing, just so that we could have fresh salmon, for our meal kind of thing, just to give you an idea. Like, so that was very much like they were trying to pull out the stops to feed us kind of thing. And then every meal would be about 11 families of the village that would cook like a roaster pan and then bring it as like a, kind of a thing for it. And everybody for the village feast brought a roaster pan and then fed us first and then got whatever leftovers were there. So then after that, we went back to Anchorage. We had some of the best Albanian food on the Bethel airport, believe it or not, which is the airport to fly back to Anchorage. Who would have thought that Chinese and Albanian food would be just 2 things you could get from the airport? That's okay. We stayed there, had a nice day walking around, and then had the Anchorage Vigil and Liturgy. It was kind of night and day different. So there are 6 churches in Anchorage. 3 of them are very white, or 4, and one of them is multicultural, the Greek church. It's got like Albanian or Romanians, Serbians, Greeks, etc. kind of thing. And then there's 2 Antiochians, 3 OCAs. This cathedral parish is the Native American cathedral. This is the one that you go to if you're Yupik or Lutic kind of thing, and you're in town kind of thing to do it. So they actually do it in multiple languages kind of thing. This is the one place that they don't do it in English all the time. Anchorage is very white. Feels like any city in the U.S. There is Hispanic people that were cleaning the hotel the one night that we stayed in a hotel. We stayed in Airbnb for the last 2 nights and hotel for the first night, kind of thing. Like it felt like anywhere in the USA. So it was just a really interesting cultural shock to go from, Native Americanism to modern. There was at least 2 McDonald's that we passed by, in Anchorage, kind of thing, like that kind of level of thing. The Anchorage Vigil, this parish is massive. There was 600 people, and I don't think that there was people outside. That was 600 people in the parish, kind of thing that they count. There's about 400 to 500 for the Vigil, and then 600 for the liturgy. They closed down all of the churches, except for the Greek church, canceled their liturgies and just said, hey, come to the church kind of thing. So it was like the collector of it. The cathedral parish by itself usually has about 120 to 200 people on a Sunday, but so it's really small. And during the summers, it's less. They only have about 40 to 50 because everybody's out fishing, kind of thing. So they're just kind of giving you an idea kind of what that's like. There was 8 bishops, mostly the Russian jurisdictions. Because of the whole church politics stuff, they're going to have the other bishops down in the south when they do kind of a 3rd glorification liturgy. 80 clergy. It was in 5 languages, 80% English kind of thing. So it was, again, like a really interesting thing to kind of actually sing her Troparion in English for once, finally, kind of thing. And they processed in with one of the 2 relics that they are allowed. And it was very emotional, very powerful to kind of see. Then we processed around the church at the very end. Father Paul got to, I think your term was be an eye candy serving priest.
Ornamental.
Ornamental, there we are.
Eye candy sounds very different. It's a big difference. It's an ornamental. Hey, people are going to say that about me.
When there's 80
Far be it for me to correct it.
When there's 80 certain clergy, there's not a lot of parts. There's not a lot of parts to go around, kind of thing. They kind of let the local clergy do all of the big parts, and bishops do most of the parts. So that over there on the left is the lamb. To give you an idea, that chalice is 6 inches by 6 inches by 8 inches tall, and the discos is about 8 inches across. Kind of thing. So just to give you an idea.
I looked over at the Proscomedia table and I'm like, whoa. So then I'm like, I have to take a picture. That was the lamb was large. Yeah. I'd never seen something like that. There's huge.
An interesting tradition. They brought the lamb out to the bishop to greet him. You know how we did the braided bread with the bishop? They actually bring the lamb, he blesses it, and then they bring it in and they do proscomedia with it. So I thought that was an interesting kind of tradition that I've never seen before, kind of thing. 12 chalices. It took actually less time to do this communion because they actually sent out the priests as the clergy were communing, so that was nice. Really kind of cool to be part of that. And we were the representative of our jurisdiction, so that was kind of cool too. Is there anything else to say from this? Do you have anything to say from this? No.
Maybe at the end.
No.
Question here?
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, so like even Roquefort and the Russian churches were participating.
Yep.
Yeah. That was like
They only
rare.
They only had just one bishop of both jurisdictions there. Otherwise, I would say, and there might have been like an
Maybe
undercover priest or two.
2 or 3 Roquefort clergy and one Moscow patriarchal one. There was one Romanian priest there, 2 or 3 Antiochian, kind of thing. So it was predominantly OCA clergy, kind of thing. Partially because that's who lives in Alaska, kind of thing. Like I said.
Does the sorry, one quick time on another question. So the diocese, like, how do the Orthodox diocese in Alaska work? Like, are they all part of the OCA?
Pretty much. I was saying at the start, there's 90 parishes in the OCA with 50 priests. There's 4 parishes that are Antiochian, and they're all related to a group of Protestant people that became Orthodox en masse from the evangelical Orthodox Church, more or less, kind of thing, or like spiritually kind of thing. And they're all around Anchorage, kind of thing. That is the only thing. There is a Greek church in Anchorage, and there's a Serbian church that has the services once a year in Anchorage. And then there is a monastery that was under Seraphim Rose, and now is under the Serbian Archdiocese in Kodiak. That is the entire non-OCA jurisdiction. It's very much a church of the Native Americans with, 4 or 5 churches that have white people in them, kind of thing. If that makes sense. I think it's very much like an Aboriginal church, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Probably irrelevant question, but Serbians also is their diocese in Kodiak?
So the Serbians have a monastery in Kodiak. And so the history of it is that St. Seraphim Rose kind of thing, monastery in California, he sent a group of monks to restart a monastery on the island where St. Herman is. And that was the monk that they're actually interviewing in the movie kind of thing. But that because of that monastery went under the Serbians and they were a dependency of it, and they became under the Serbians. So that's the one Serbian jurisdictional thing is that monastery, if that makes sense. Sorry, yep.
I just think you should have taken some of us with you.
Honestly, I really there was a moment there that it became very clear that I wish so many more of us had gone, if it were possible. There was nobody there except for those who were local that were there en masse. But it was really it was a once in a lifetime thing. And yeah, the words are really cheap in expressing what that felt like to be around how this little small woman who loved Christ so much could gather so many people together like a mother does, and for only joy to exist. And it wasn't fake. It wasn't like we were acting joyful, like we were at a party and we had to laugh. It was really like a glimpse of something that was not from this side. And I know that sounds poetic, but I'm at a loss here. I wish you could have seen it, is really what I came back wanting to yell at each of you. It was tiring. It was super tiring. I slept so easy on the floor all of those nights. I think Deacon Michael did too. The snores were really fluid through the school. But it was so beautiful.
And it was very much like God's will. When the bishop finally gave his permission, the registration had closed. So I emailed them and I said, hey, is there any way you could find room for 2 more clergy? And the woman recognized my last name because my father is the vice chancellor of the diocese, and they'd given a lot of money to the diocese of Alaska. She's like, oh, well, I guess I should let this random guy that has the same last name, in, kind of thing. Just was that was her thought process when she told me afterwards, kind of thing. Okay. So we got in, kind of thing. Everything seemed to work out in a way that I would have never thought that we'd been able to do it. Kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe as the church matures and grows and we find ourselves in different places in our life, maybe one day we can attempt to go and do something like this. The only thing is it's a serious pilgrimage. When you get there, It's not like, okay, now what, one activity we can do after we venerate her body is we can go and grab dinner. That's not going to happen. There's nowhere to grab dinner. A cup of noodles is what you're going to get. And, there's really, like, I don't know, somebody would have to host you. So it would be really like, it would be tough. But, they have Kodiak, they have Sitka. It's a kind of orthodoxy that we're not used to, that is worth seeing. Who knows? Maybe someday we can figure that out. That would be nice as a parish to kind of do. I think actually, and I was actually, the people I was mostly thinking, of course I thought of all of you, I was thinking of my boys and the power of seeing a saint and venerating a saint as a child, I think is, and like it was sending me back. Like one thing that had really convinced me of my faith was when I was 10, I went to Egypt and found myself venerating the relics of St. Moses the Black and St. Isidore and St. Paisius of Egypt. And thinking that they stood here. This was this desert that they saw. These are the wells that they drank from. I'm touching this, I can see this. There's, and then that was happening all over again, vividly. Like I had those same feelings. This was the road that Matushka Olga walked to get to the people who she was helping to deliver babies, to the women who were being abused, to go and bring them, to go and comfort them. And then we saw her body. Then we could see her skull. We kissed her skull. These are, there's real, like, we're touching eternity at that point. Anyway, I wish for all of you to do this in your life. Go and find saints' relics, even whole relics. Give yourself over to a pilgrimage. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so the final thing, at a banquet, traditional lutic dancing, they did starring or caroling. What's really fascinating is that a lot of the carols were like Ukrainian carols that I grew up with as a kid, done in Yupik or done in a lutic or done in Klingit. So it's really fascinating to kind of see that, cultural heritage with it. That quote is from Father Paul. This is like
I say all the most profound things.
The one thing to bring up is on the top right picture. Those are things that St. Olga made for people. Kind of thing. So that's boots and a shirt and then socks that she made. I think. So it was really kind of cool to see that. It was cool to see that there is a prayer shawl that she made kind of thing. So it was really kind of cool to see that connection and actually have people bring stuff that she had made for them in their lives and then bring it to the banquet to show them.
What's that on the bottom there?
That's a star. So starring. It's caroling. There is this idea, like even in Saskatchewan, people will go around to people's houses and sing carols kind of thing during Christmas. You do it for the 12 days after Christmas. It's like the feast, kind of thing. You do it till a little bit till Theophany. In this village, and they still do it in Ukrainian villages as well, there's this idea of like walking around with a star, and they kind of spin it, and it kind of makes like, it often has light, like candles or sparklers, or just like it's really shiny, and they spin it, and it kind of creates like a swirling patterns, and so people kind of spin it. So they have 5 or 6 stars that people were walking through the congregation, like doing this as they're singing the carols. It's a really kind of a cool thing. You can look it up if you ever want to know. It's called starring. And that's it. This took longer because you asked a lot of questions and because I'm long-winded. So thank you. Any final thoughts here? I know it's getting late and you guys have sat through us, so thank you. Yeah.
Just a shout out to Vanessa as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Vanessa, this was tremendously beautiful. Thank you, James, for also helping to.
All I
Yeah,
did was
that's
send a
right,
link.
yeah.
Can you share the presentation afterwards?
Sure. Yeah. We'll put a link or in Facebook or something. We'll figure it out. We have social media people in the church that are smarter than me. Go ahead.
Do you know where the second relic is of St. Olga that was allowed to leave the village?
It's going to stay in either Kodiak or Anchorage. They haven't decided yet. So.
I was hoping they sent it to like New York or somewhere close by.
So one will be in Washington, and then one will be in Anchorage. So those are the two relics that are.
Which Washington?
Washington D.C.
Where?
Washington D.C.
Dorothy.
Which church?
At St. Nicholas Cathedral of the OCA in Washington D.C.
Okay.
But it won't be there all the time. Their intention is to travel around with it to various places, especially for this year, kind of thing. There's going to be a keeper of the relics. One of the deacons that was there is going to travel through the United States and kind of go with the relics and do venerations and things. So
To get on the circuit.
I'm sorry?
You just have to get on the circuit.
We just have to get on the circuit, I tell you. Canada, come on! yeah. So, it'd be great. But I mean, don't feel like we've lost out, and they still left the doors open. They're just like, this village is not comfortable with the idea of bones really being taken away, kind of thing. Like, she's here, she's from here, and she stays here. So, I think that what we got for relics is still really beautiful, and as Father said, really kind of first class. It likely is the decomposed flesh and pieces of her coffin from her. Yeah.
Just something to share. I read an article just a few days ago that the relics of St. Jacob of Alaska have probably been located.
Yes. So Father Herman, this priest who was talking about the NSA, so first of all, he has started a revitalization of the Tlingit language, and he's actually restoring it. There's only about 500 speakers of it. There's only two groups that still have active speakers, Haida Gwaii and the Tlingit in Sitka. The original church burnt down in the 1930s, 1945, during the war. They believe it was arson by a soldier. They then rebuilt the church, but slightly over, kind of thing. The graves were kind of just rotted away over time. Those crosses just disappeared, especially during the period of time when Orthodox was kind of being suppressed in Alaska. So they don't know which grave around the original church is his. So as part of a group of people that got funding during our No Child Left Behind kind of movement, they actually got funding to do the sonar and find all the graves. And they knew from the oral history that his grave is right to the right of the church doors. And they can see the outline of the church by plotting all of the graves, where it would have been and where there's a thing. And there's a body that's facing a different direction than all the others, kind of thing, at that spot that is likely him. So there is a plan within the next year or two to exhume his body and bring it into the cathedral. And then they're actually going to build a traditional log church in the Tlingit style that actually there is no more existing Tlingit style churches in Alaska, kind of thing, and built it there as a shrine for his body, kind of thing, on the spot where he was buried. So they're finally going to be able to do that, which is kind of really interesting. So there may be other opportunities for us to sneak up to Alaska if you guys want to go. The only other thing just to mention is what's really interesting is there's a revitalization of spirituality that's happening in this diocese. And even in the OCA, they were telling me about how some of the bishops in the 50s or 60s kind of came up with like an English-only mindset and kind of did as much harm as like the previous people. And it's kind of like revitalized. And it's really interesting talking to them. A lot of people are really hit by Matushka Olga among the Native American people because they're like, she is me. She could be me. She could be my grandmother. If she can be a saint, then anybody can be a saint. And so there's a huge kind of revitalization. A lot of the clergy we met were either really old or really young, kind of thing. And there's a huge group of people in the last 5 years that have been ordained. Variety of backgrounds. Some of them, we were talking to this one Father Ishmael or something. He was like the first in his family that's gone to university. So there's a variety of like spectrum of like what kind of, education level of priests and stuff like that, but they feel like they're called to do this, that this is part of it. And a lot of them, their orthodoxy was based on like a home life. The family did all the prayers together, readers did funerals and marriages, and then the priest would come and kind of like finalize it for people. So there's actually a village in Unalaska that they did a liturgy for the first time in 50 years, and people still remember the hymns and were still able to do the liturgy, even though they had not had a liturgy there for 50 years, with a bishop, kind of thing. Because the families kind of kept it in there as kind of their tradition. And so it's interesting to kind of see this revitalization. It's all tied up with like rediscovering my identity as an Orthodox Christian, rediscover my identity as a Native American, which is really fascinating to see.
Maybe before we adjourn, we can sing the Troparia of Kentuckian of Matushka Olga. I'd want to invite everybody. We received a lot this evening, and especially I would hope that maybe you could go home and ponder the words of what we heard, especially in Sacred Alaska. Before you leave, come venerate St. Olga. Take in what that was. Yeah.
Do you mind just shouting out the donation for the filmmakers and the diocese? Just letting you know. Anyway.
Donation, please.
Yeah, okay, so the filmmakers of Sacred Alaska, they did not charge us, as James mentioned, this licensing fee. They let us freely host this for free. Obviously, this was free for all of you. So if you can donate to the filmmakers, there's a QR code in the back. There's also a QR code in the next slide.
Oh.
Yeah. So if you want to donate to the filmmakers, that's the name of the production company. If you want to see more Orthodox films being made,
Or if you want to send an e-transfer, just say like it's for the Alaska film.
Yes, alternatively, you can also, you can donate to St. Silouan, and we can donate on your behalf. There's also, if you want to donate directly to the Orthodox Diocese of Sitka, Alaska, those are the two places. If you if you follow this link, it actually shows you all the projects that they have that you can fund. They have like the Matushka Olga Fund, and they have like the Land Fund, and all these different projects that they're working on. So that's an interesting link to check out. But Eric.
Yeah, just want to specify one thing about donations. So, if your intention is that money should go to the Orthodox Diocese of Sitka and Alaska, do not pass that money through St. Silouan's, because St. Silouan's is a Canadian charity, probably cannot send that money on to a U.S. charity. On the other hand, if you want your money to go to the filmmakers, St. Silouan's can pay a licensing fee to the filmmaker.
Yeah.
So you could donate directly you could make a payment directly to them, or you could make a payment to St. Silouan specifying that that's for the filmmaker, and St. Silouan's can pay a licensing fee to a filmmaker.
Aaron, just to correct you, there is actually a Canadian entity that we can donate to that we'll pass it on to.
Oh.
To get it to Sitka?
To get it to the Diocese of Alaska. Yep.
Okay.
They have set up-
Well, yeah,
they have
we'll talk
set
about
up a
that
Canadian
afterwards.
entity.
So the most important thing then is just specify what your donation is for, so we can.
Or we'll split it if you don't specify, but tell us that it's for
If
this.
you don't specify, we'll have to decide.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, QR code's there. There's also